Episode 6, the Istanbul Bazaar, Understanding the Price of Choices. Have you ever stood in a place so full of choices that it became overwhelming, where every decision, big or small, felt like it carried more weight than it should? That was the Istanbul Bazaar for me, a labyrinth of colour, sound and temptation. But beyond the carpets, the spices and the endless stalls, I learned something important that day. Every choice has a price, and sometimes the hardest part isn't making the choice, it's deciding what you're willing to pay for it. This is the story of how a single purchase taught me to value what truly matters. Istanbul's Grand Bazaar isn't just a market, it's a universe all its own, a maze of over 4,000 shops filled with treasures you didn't know you needed. Imagine row after row of colourful carpets, gleaming lanterns that scatter light like jewels, and spices so fragrant you can taste them on the air. I had come to the bazaar on a whim, determined to lose myself in its legendary chaos. But the moment I stepped through its gates, I realised I was in trouble. Every shop, every corner was a temptation. The merchants knew how to weave magic into their words, how to make you believe that this item, this lamp, this scarf, this bracelet was the one thing you couldn't leave without. I wandered aimlessly, my senses overloaded, until I stopped at a small stall tucked into a quieter corner of the market. The shopkeeper, an elderly man with a sharp gaze and a deep voice, greeted me warmly. "Welcome, friend," he said. "Come, let me show you something special." I didn't plan to buy anything, but his voice was magnetic, his manner kind. He reached beneath the counter and pulled out an object wrapped carefully in cloth. When he unwrapped it, I couldn't help but stare. It was a small copper teapot, engraved with intricate designs that seemed to dance in the light. "This is not just a teapot," he said with a smile. "It's a story." I asked him what he meant, and his smile widened. "Every piece you see in this market has a price, but the real price is not in the money, it's in the meaning. The question is, what is it worth to you?" The teapot was beautiful, but it wasn't cheap. The shopkeeper named his price, and I hesitated. It wasn't outrageous, but it was enough to make me question whether I truly needed it. I looked around the shop, at the shelves filled with lanterns, trays and antiques, and felt paralysed by the weight of the decision. Seeing my hesitation, the shopkeeper sat down across from me and poured 2 small cups of tea. "Sit," he said. "Let me tell you something." I sipped the tea. It was strong with hints of mint and something floral, and he spoke slowly. "In life, every choice has a price. The question is not whether you can afford it, but whether it matters enough to pay for it." I frowned. "But it's just a teapot." He shook his head. "Nothing is just anything. Everything you choose means saying no to something else." I thought about his words as I stared at the teapot. It wasn't just about the money. I had limited space in my backpack, limited days on this trip, and limited resources. Buying this meant sacrificing something else. Another meal, another experience, another story. "What if I regret it?" I asked him. The shopkeeper smiled again, his gaze steady. "The regret isn't in the choice you make, it's in avoiding the choice altogether. Life doesn't wait for us to decide." His words struck something deep inside me. How many times had I avoided decisions in my life, paralysed by the fear of choosing wrong? How many opportunities had I missed because I couldn't decide what was worth the price? I looked at the teapot again. It was beautiful, yes, but what did it mean to me? Was it worth the price? Was it a story I wanted to carry home? I didn't buy the teapot that day. I thanked the shopkeeper, finished my tea, and left the stall feeling strangely at peace. It wasn't about the teapot at all, it was about learning to make choices with intention. As I walked through the rest of the bazaar, I felt lighter. I didn't rush to buy anything, but I stopped and admired the beauty of it all. I saw a young girl laughing as she tried on bangles, a couple haggling playfully over a carpet, an old man explaining the history of his lanterns to a curious traveller. Everyone was choosing something, paying a price for what mattered to them. And maybe that's what life is, I realised, a series of choices, big and small, where we decide what's worth the cost. Sometimes the price is money. Other times it's time, energy, or letting go of something else. But if we choose with intention, the price doesn't feel like a loss. It feels like an investment. That evening, as I sat on a rooftop terrace overlooking the city, the call to prayer echoed through the air. I thought about the shopkeeper's words. The real price is not in the money, it's in the meaning. I didn't leave Istanbul with a teapot, but I did leave with a story. And that was worth more than anything I could have carried in my backpack. So I'll leave you with this. What choices are you avoiding right now? What is the price of saying yes or saying no? And what story will you carry forward because of it? Next week, we'll take a midnight walk through Paris, where I discovered that sometimes the hardest part of dreaming is giving yourself permission to begin again. Until then, remember, every choice has a price. Choose what matters most.